Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is ICAT's monthly professional development webinar. My name is Untitled. I'll be the moderator. Our topic for today is innovation and how to innovate. Today's sponsor is ICAT Professional Services. ICAT Professional Services is your partner for professional development, talent source, data analytics, and societal impact. Service offerings include Career Academy, outsourcing, staffing, and recruitment, applied data analytics, social enterprise. ICAT, making your people and data greater. To know more about ICAT, please visit icat.net. Our webinar tools, just a reminder to make sure you all mute yourself until it's your turn to speak for clarity. And you're all welcome to use the chat for any questions, comments, and suggestions. And also you can raise your hand. Today's panel leader is Jonathan Tessier, and he will take over from now. Jonathan, I give it to you.
Thank you, Sion, and welcome everybody. It's good to have you here for this discussion around the concept of innovation. And we have some great speakers for you today. I'm going to kick things off with looking at innovation from the standpoint of learning and the individual and how they learn. Then we're going to have Mary speak to us about health and innovation, and you'll clearly see a lot of innovation going on in health these days, and she's going to touch on that. We're also going to have Anne talk about innovation, but not from an individual standpoint like I'm going to. She's going to look at it from an organizational standpoint and how organizations can achieve innovation. We're also going to have Sion Abraham talk about technology and innovation, which those two are like close cousins, and how you can accelerate innovation when you're dealing with technology. And we're going to round things off with Stu talking about the diffusion of innovation, and you'll get some great ideas of how innovation can be put into action. So lots to take in. Go ahead and get comfortable, and we're going to go ahead and start off with this whole idea of individuals and innovation, how individuals learn to become innovators. So my background is in training and also in coaching, and so I've looked at a lot of innovative ways to teach and for people to learn. And I wanted to share with you a couple different perspectives that have come out of the work that I have done. So in the coming slides that you're going to see, I have three different perspectives that I want to have you think about when it comes to innovation, especially from the standpoint of the learner. And the first innovation perspective that I want you to keep in mind is your mind is like a garden. So innovation is born in the mind. It is through our thoughts that we create the world we live in. For innovation, our minds become our most crucial resource. Think of your mind as an incredibly rich, fertile piece of land where you can plant and grow whatever you like, even things not yet imagined. If you can become aware of and master the mind's power, you can alter what you see by simply altering your thoughts. If we can really start to see that it is our thinking, which is the cause behind all the effects we experience, we can discover how much actual control we have over what is happening to us in our lives and what we can offer the world around us. We do this work actively or passively, but either way, we have a tremendous influence on what will show up. So the power of thought is the power to innovate. That's the first perspective. Next slide. The second perspective that I want to give to you is your mind is boundless. Not only is the mind in a constant state of activity, it is virtually boundless in its capabilities. Imaginatively and creatively, we can think without limit. We can dream and invent at will. We can even take existing facts and knowledge and perceive them in new and more interesting ways. Every act, no matter how big or small, starts as an idea in the mind. And the third perspective that I want to share with you regarding innovation, and I like to call this one, next slide. I like to call this one plant new thought seeds. So think about this for a moment. Thoughts are real. Like seeds, they are concentrated bundles of energy that have immense potential and power. We have known for decades that the brain is a transmitter of energy. It's measured in waves, and those brain waves can be gauged and quantified. So science validates that thoughts are energy, and if they are energy, they are also matter. Everything we create from matter actually goes through two stages of creation. First, there is this forming of an idea in the mind. We'll call these thought seeds. And just like the act of planting seeds, these ideas are placed in the tilled soil of our minds. Every thought seed sown or allowed to fall into that fertile, rich soil of the mind and to take root eventually produces its own blossoming. Second, these thought seeds are acted upon in a physical way. We water and fertilize these seeds. We care for them so that one day something physical and real sprouts up in our lives. The body is truly a servant of the mind with the purpose of bringing ideas into being. The body facilitates the mind's power by responding to its wishes. This means that our outer world of our lives results directly from the inner world of our thoughts. The two are connected. So innovation can then be viewed through a simple formula. Your mind drives your body to fulfill a prevalent thought. In other words, your mind wills and your body enacts. Now let's take these concepts that we're just talking about, do a little activity here, and test this idea of our thoughts and kind of what our thoughts see and what our thoughts have the potential to see differently in a different perspective or from a different point of view. And so I want to do this activity with you. And next slide, please. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you a grid. And I'm going to give you 10 seconds to determine the number of squares you see in the grid. At the end of 10 seconds, I'll ask Sion to forward the slide and the grid will disappear. And then just take a moment to write down the number of squares that you saw. Okay? And if everybody is ready, here's the grid. Okay, that's 10 seconds. Just take a moment to write down the number of squares that you saw. Okay, now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the grid one more time. And when I show you the grid this second time, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to give you 10 seconds, and then we'll have the grid disappear. And I want you to write down now again how many squares you see. Three, two, one. Okay, great. So just take a moment to write down your number. All right, let's do this one more time. Here's the grid again. You have 10 seconds. Look at it again. See if there's any more squares you can see. Okay, So write down a final number for the number of squares you saw in that grid. Okay, Sion, go back for a moment. So as we're talking about this idea of how many squares that you see, let me just give you a couple questions to think about with the numbers that you wrote down. So the first question that I want you to think about is, was your final answer a larger number than your first answer? In other words, what happened when I asked you to look again and again at this grid? Just think about that for a moment. Did your number increase? Now I want you to also think about, how does this relate to the mind and the idea of innovation that we were just talking about? And so I'd like to hear from a couple of you. You can either speak or you can just put your words in the chat. But did you see more squares with a second and third look at the grid? Okay, we have some people responding, saying yes, they did see more squares. All right. So with that in mind, how does this activity relate to the mind and innovation? And when you have an idea about that, go ahead and put that in the chat as well. How does this relate to the mind and innovation? It goes beyond the initial obvious. Coming back to the same problem again and again gives you new ideas. Great. Super. Right? That idea of looking at something more than once. Different perspectives. Absolutely correct. Right? All of that is telling you something about this whole concept of innovation and learning and seeing things differently, as someone just posted in the chat as well. So let's take a look at the answer key for a moment and see how many actual squares there were. So Sion, can you advance to the next? Okay. So you can see here that after that initial glance that someone said, we can see 16 squares here, right? But obviously that's not all the squares there is. See on the next slide. We have 16 to begin with. Oh, look, there's 17. See on, next slide. And look at those squares, 18, 19, 20, and 21. Next slide. All the way up to now to 26. And one more time, Sion. And there you go. You can see many different squares are in this grid. And so we've come up with a number of 30 here that we may not have seen the first time we were looking at this grid. So what is this really saying when we're talking about innovation? We need to, number one, question everything. Two, as some of you pointed out in the chat, look at things from different vantage points. And three, foster both an analytical and creative way of thinking. And all those things can really help with innovation. Next slide. So in conclusion, here's what I'd like you to think about and take away from our presentation here about innovation in the individual. In order to change to new thought seeds, we must first become aware of the thoughts we are typically having and how those thoughts are shaping, consciously or unconsciously, our outlook, our character, and the circumstances we face. What do innovators do that is different? To be a true innovator, you must use both your creative right brain and your analytical left brain to create new thoughts from which new perspectives and therefore new ideas appear. And once they appear, they can then be acted upon. All right, thank you, everyone. And with that, as sort of a starting point with innovation, let's explore it from some other different perspectives and also from some other different career fields. And so what we're going to do next, I'm going to hand the baton off to Mary here, and Mary is going to look at innovation from a health perspective. And so, Sion, if you would, there you go. Mary, take it away, and let's learn about innovation from public health.
Thank you, Jonathan. My name is Mary, and I am a public health expert. Next slide, Sion. So what we're living through right now has put health innovation in front and center. It's in the news every day. So I don't think I have to try that hard to sell you why health innovation is important, because it's disrupted all of our lives as we know it. There are many ways to innovate in health, and today my focus will be public health and the relevance of vaccines in public health. So one of the main goals of public health is to prevent disease. It's much easier to prevent somebody from getting sick instead of looking for a cure or a treatment after they're sick. And then one of the best ways to prevent disease is through vaccines. And basically, I'll do a brief synopsis of vaccines. So every day we're exposed to many things that can make us sick. And your immune system works very hard at keeping you healthy and eliminating anything foreign that enters your body, such as, bacteria, viruses. And when you have an infection, your body will remember the organism that caused the infection, and it gets better at fighting it if you're exposed to it in the future. So the role of vaccines is basically to stimulate the immune system just like an infection would, so that you build immunity against something. And if you're exposed to it later on, your body already has an immunity to it. So that's what vaccines do. So the race to innovate for COVID is that, we prevent more people from getting sick when they get COVID when the vaccine starts to be distributed, basically, to use that as an example for why vaccines are important in public health. Next slide, Zion. So the why, aside from what we're living through right now, there are many, many other vaccines and that have been important in history and currently as well. Vaccines save lives. And as you can see in this figure here, in the past, from 2011 till now, 23 million deaths have been averted because of the vaccines that you see at the bottom. So the biggest numbers are related to measles and then hepatitis, but then you have other vaccines as well down there. So vaccines are very important in public health. And then the second why is vaccines increase the quality of life. So some diseases kill you, others can be debilitating. And an example of this is polio. Mostly people would survive polio, but it is paralyzing. So currently, because of, there are many organizations driving to basically eradicate polio. And currently, it is only exists in 2 or 3 countries. And so we're hoping that polio will be eradicated pretty soon. Another one that has been eradicated in the past is smallpox. So the only disease that's ever been eradicated for human beings happened because of a vaccine. And then the other why is vaccines increase life expectancy. So in the 20th century, life expectancy has increased dramatically. In the past 150 years, life expectancy has gone from 39 years to 78. So it's almost doubled. And this increase is largely attributed to child survival. And child survival happened because of the immunization efforts that have happened around the world. Next slide, please. And these are numbers that you've seen in the news. We are in the middle of a pandemic, and it has affected everyone around the world. We have seen nearly 1.3 million, over 1.3 million deaths globally, and nearly 250,000. And by this time, I'm sure it might have surpassed this number. This is as of sometime last week. So the why is really easy to see given what we're living through right now. And so next slide, we can talk about, how to innovate in health. One of the ways, at least in my training and what I do for a living, one of the best ways to innovate for health is to look at existing bottlenecks. So you have existing public health processes or healthcare processes or products, and you ask, how can it be done better? One of the examples that we can look at, for example, is research and development. The past 10 months, 11 months has been a race to develop COVID vaccines, and you've heard a lot about what kind of vaccines there are. And I think the two that are currently most effective, like above 90% effective, created by Moderna and Pfizer, are mRNA vaccines. And this means you need 2 doses for the vaccine. So you need 1 dose, and then you kind of need, somewhere down the line, a month to down the line, you need another dose for it to be effective, to be as effective as like 90%. And so, but one of the things as a public health practitioner that I can tell you is that it's very hard to get people to keep coming back. So if you can get it in one go, so if there was a vaccine that just, you took it once and then it's very effective, it's much easier than trying to convince somebody, okay, you've taken this, now come back a month from now, and then come back another month from now. So that's one way. That's one way that you can innovate in research and development. Another one that you keep hearing about is the temperature that a vaccine has to be stored at to be effective. So that's one place to innovate. So not everyone's COVID vaccine is going to be accessible, especially the ones that have to be kept at freezing temperature. For example, you have to have it freezing from the production line to, when it's done being produced to when it's implemented or given to somebody else. And if you think about it, distribution worldwide, there are places where power is an issue. So something that maybe could be cold but doesn't need to be freezing might be more accessible to places where power is an issue. So when you look at innovation, there are many places you can intervene in health and say, we can do this better. This technology can improve for better accessibility. Other things that are really important in public health, aside from the science, is communication. Making sure that people understand the effectiveness of vaccines, that they accept it. So you basically need community buy-in. And a good example of how community buy-in is important is, for example, HPV vaccine prevents cervical cancer. And not all places introduced it in the same way. Different countries had different strategies. And Rwanda is the success story for HPV vaccines because they now have 93% coverage because of how they were able to market it in the community, in the country. And then on the other hand, US, for example, doesn't have a high coverage compared to Rwanda. We're at 51% because of lack of community buy-in. So that's another thing. The technology by itself, the medicine by itself, doesn't get you anywhere. You can't get anywhere unless you're thoughtful and innovative when you're delivering the vaccine. And there are many other places that you can innovate in health. One of the things in public health is you need a lot of data to be able to know what's happening, especially right now. You see the graphs of, what's happening geomap wise. If there's a hotspot for COVID, for example, you want to know that. So you need data, and then you need people who do a lot of things with big data, such as geospatial mapping, and also standardizing how data is collected, and then standardizing how data is shared so that you can make decisions real time. You're not waiting for all of that to be processed. So those are all the places that innovation can happen in public health. I see a question from in the chat that says, how can we ensure that politics does not enter public health? That is a very difficult question to answer, but that's also in terms of, that's also communication, right? Of how. That's a hard question. That's a question I think a lot of public health agencies have to think about moving forward. I'm not sure I could do it justice at this moment. So I'm gonna hand it off to the next presenter.
All right, Mary, thank you so much. And Sion, if we can advance to the next slide. We are going to talk about innovation, but this time we're going to look at it from the standpoint of organizations. And with that, I'm going to hand the baton off to Anne, and Anne's going to take you through that presentation. Anne?
Thank you so much, Jonathan. All right, the next slide, and we'll get started with how companies can actually innovate. And this is just a little bit about me so that you know my background. I'm a learning consultant, instructional designer, and I've also authored a chapter in the ATD book, and my chapter was about innovation. So hopefully you can take a look at that as well to take an even deeper dive into approaches that individuals and companies can take for innovation. Next slide. We're just going to go ahead and jump into it. So everybody, we've talked about innovation, but really what is innovation? It makes changes in something established, especially by introducing new methods, ideas, or products. So we're going to talk about how to get to those new methods and ideas and products in a couple approaches that I'm going to talk to you about today. Next slide. Design thinking. This is an approach that really works well for corporations. If they look at design thinking, you can look at it from a team, but as a corporation, if you can actually permeate the idea of design thinking throughout your company, you start to see innovation popping up all over the place. So what is design thinking? Why should we even care? Well, it's the mindset that aims to improve the situation of people through the experiences they have. So we don't look at a problem as a problem. We look at an opportunity from a person's perspective, right? So it says, how is that person interacting? How do the people who do this, use this, need this, want this, or impacted by this? How do they see it? How do they use it, et cetera? And that really creates the innovation. So we don't think of, hey, let me redesign this coffee maker. We look at, hey, what is the experience that we want the person to have when they're having coffee? What do they feel, think? How will it make that experience better? So you can think of the old fashioned, let's make 8 cups of coffee, let it sit there and percolate and boil and get old. Or you can think of, well, I bet when somebody created Keurig, they probably thought, how do we make this experience better? And they made it faster, quicker, and 1 cup, no stale coffee, right? So that's really the idea of looking at it from an individual's perspective and that type of a situation. If you could let me share, I would like to go ahead and share a video to explain design thinking. And right now it's disabled. All right, if we're not able to do that, I'll just move on with the slides. All right, here we go. I can share now. So I'm just going to play this video real quick and it'll give you a good overview.
Solve those problems by coming up with many ideas, not just 1 or 2. Is design thinking? Design thinking is a problem-solving approach that aims to improve people's experiences. Instead of seeking to define an idea by its structural parts, it focuses on how an idea helps a person achieve a task and how it makes them think and feel. Design thinking originated in the late 1960s and early 1970s as a way to work differently by focusing deeply on the human experience when creating physical products. As a practice, it meant that in order to design the best chair possible, the people working on that chair must consider who would be using it, where, and how. Today, design thinking is applied to almost every modern field and industry. People have extracted the basic components of design thinking and used them to design complex products, such as MRI machines and software, and also services such as air travel, business consulting, and customer service. A variety of models exist today outlining these basic components. The Stanford D School, for example, one of the first organizations to formalize a comprehensive design thinking curriculum, uses this model. A flow from building empathy, defining a problem or opportunity, to ideating a solution to that problem, prototyping it, and testing. Most design thinking models follow such a flow. They include many of the same values, focus on real people and their real needs, interact with those people to understand what problems they face, think about how to solve those problems by coming up with many ideas, not just 1 or 2. Be visual in your thinking and brainstorming, and experiment by quickly and cheaply testing unfinished ideas to understand how they might work. When you practice design thinking, you consider a person's true, unique experience, not just technology and requirements. In this way, you're not designing a vase. You're designing a better way to enjoy flowers in your home.
Thank you. And you can go back to the slides, please. So while the slides are coming up, what we noticed in that video is that, again, it's really human focused, but you can see just the process of going through, the next slide, thank you. The process of going through design thinking, it basically enables innovation. It really says, let's not think of things the way they would be thought of traditionally. Let's think of that user in new ways and different ideas, think outside the box. A lot of the things that design thinking does is it ideates, as they said, put up lots of ideas, even if they may not seem like they can work. And then you go through them and each person gets the opportunity to ideate on that idea, right? So you may even find an idea that seems crazy that ends up working out to be something great. So again, the principles are we focus on user outcomes, relentless re-innovation, and we have diverse empowered teams. Again, something else that really creates great innovation is having people who see the world differently than you do. Next slide. So we can see one of the principles of design thinking is the loop, right? So you have to observe to understand the present. You think about what you just saw, and you really talk about what we want to make the future. So you can see it's kind of an infinite loop of constantly reinventing and innovating and reflecting and creating new. Next slide. So the keys to enterprise design thinking is it's scalable practices for companies, for teams, right? So the hills are what we're trying to solve for. For example, with the vase, how to enjoy flowers. Playbacks are when we say, this is what we've done, this is what we think we want to accomplish. And then sponsor users, if you remember from the video, we really interact with those end users, right? So that we get into their experience. What do they really see? And how do they feel about what we're doing and what we're working on? What ideas do they have? Next slide. All right, the next approach I'd like to discuss is Agile. And often Agile is used with design thinking. And Agile's been around a while, but it's made a huge comeback with what we're, the way we need to just kind of move forward really quickly in the world, and taking months and months to do things doesn't really work anymore, right? So we have this kind of almost an instant gratification society, which includes companies and customers and clients. So Agile is often paired with design thinking so that you actually go through a process and it makes it even more rapid. And it's one of the things some people say are fail fast, fail often, so that you figure out what works, what doesn't, improve upon it, and move forward. So Agile matches up well because it's also people focused, it's results focused, it respects a rapidly changing world, it's centered around adaptive planning, short delivery time. So again, fail fast, fail often. It's flexible, it's fast, and it promotes innovation. Next. And here we can just see here's some of the key fundamental aspects of an Agile team, right? It improves communication and it requires that. There's introspectives that really what you do is you look at what you're doing and what went well, what went poorly, and you ask this of yourself often, right? Every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, so that you basically improve. It's flexible and it adapts to what you're doing, hence what we just talked about, the moving forward and adapting. And often it's run by self-organizing and self-sufficient ways because of teams, right? They have teams, they have squads, they do what is called sprints, which means they work on something for 2 weeks or so, they get it done, they test it, and then they move on, right? So you can actually deliver things very quickly, even though they're smaller chunks. And it also allows for a lot of collaboration and independent management, and the team typically determines what they think they can accomplish and what they should work on, which again also supports innovation. All right, and there is a question in the chat, and I think it's asking about small companies versus larger companies. And the reason that I brought forth design thinking and Agile as two approaches is it really disregards the size of your company, the size of your team. You can do this as a team of just a couple people. You can do it as a consultant when you're the only consultant working with a customer or a client. Because really it's the approaches that matter, not the size of the team. So you actually can use it with small or large organizations. And the good thing about it is they're approaches and they're pretty much free. You might have tools that support your approach, but there's really no need to spend a lot of money to do it. It just really is about a mindset and moving forward using those approaches. I hope that answered the question. Next slide. So I just wanted to wrap up by giving you a couple resources. I mentioned earlier that I co-wrote a chapter in the ATD book, Leading the Learning Function, all about innovation. And it has a lot more about design thinking, but it also has a lot of examples of innovation that I participated in and that others did as well. Then we have my LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out to me on my LinkedIn profile. And a really great resource is there's actually a free course that IBM puts out. This was a response to COVID. They went ahead and made quite a bit of thought leadership and innovation free. So please feel free to use that link and get a badge for design thinking, for enterprise design thinking. Thank you, and turn it back over to the moderator.
And thank you so much. Awesome information there. Enjoyed your video as well. So moving right along, we have now up Sion Abraham, and she is going to talk about innovation from the standpoint of technology. Sion?
Thank you, Jonathan. Hello, everybody. My name is Sion Abraham. I am an IT professional with the federal government with 20 years of work experience in the IT field. Over the years, technology has fundamentally changed our world and daily lives. Technology has created amazing tools and resources, putting useful information at our fingertips. So in today's innovation presentation, we will focus on cloud technology platform. At the end of this presentation, you will learn what cloud technology platform is, the deployment models, the characteristics of cloud services, what are the services offered by the cloud. Slide, please. Okay, forward. So let's see, what is cloud technology anyway? So the term cloud services refers to a wide range of services delivered on demand to companies and customers over the internet. So these services are designed to provide easy, affordable access to applications and resources without the need to internal infrastructure or hardware. Next slide, please. So how do we accelerate innovation via technology, and what are the deployment models of this cloud technology? So like I said earlier, cloud computing is simply the use of internet-based services to support a business process. So there are actually three types of cloud computing deployment models according to Amazon. Cloud-based applications can be public cloud services. That means they can fully run within the cloud. They may have been created inside the cloud or migrated from a local infrastructure. The biggest benefit of using public cloud service is the ability to share resources at scale, allowing organizations to offer employees more capable than would likely be possible alone. The second model is on-premises or private cloud computing. This is a more specialized deployment model with few general advantages of the other type. With the private cloud services, apps and data are made available through the organization's own internal infrastructure. The platform and software service one company alone and are not made available to external users. So that's why it's called private. Companies that work with highly sensitive data, like those in the healthcare and banking industries, often use private cloud services and leverage advanced security protocols and extend resources in a virtualized environment as needed. And the third option is hybrid deployment. Hybrid deployment connects cloud-based applications and infrastructure with existing resources that are not located in the cloud. In a hybrid cloud environment, a private cloud solution is combined with public cloud services. This arrangement is often used when an organization needs to store sensitive data in the private cloud, but wants employees to access apps and resources in the public cloud for day-to-day communication. Next slide, please. So one may ask, why cloud? How do we accelerate innovation again via technology? So cloud services typically have 5 characteristics. Number one, they can be rapidly deployed, so they are quick to value because the cloud service provides suppliers all necessary infrastructure and software. There is no need for a company to invest in its own resources or allocate extra IT staff to manage its resources. There is little or no startup cost and no capital investment, which means many cloud services are provided on a monthly or annual subscription basis. That eliminates the need to pay for on-premises software licenses. And the other thing is costs for services are usage-based with no fixed commitment. This allows organizations to access software, storage, and other services without having to invest in infrastructure or handle maintenance and upgrades. Services can be quickly and easily scaled up or down with no penalty. With this cloud service, if and when there is no longer a need for a particular application or platform, the business can simply cancel the subscription or shut down the service. So services are multi-tenant, means many customers leverage the platform. Next slide, please. So what type of cloud service are there? So the cloud lets users contract for service at 4 levels. The first level is called infrastructure as a service. This platform supply everything users need as a package. This includes both hardware and software, provides infrastructure that many cloud service providers need to manage but don't want to maintain themselves, eliminating the need for resource-intensive on-site installations. Examples of infrastructure as a service are Amazon Web Services or AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Computer Engine or GEC or GCE. The second is platform as a service. This is more advanced form of infrastructure as a service, no limits on hardware. This allows developers to focus on application development and not worry about operating systems, infrastructure scaling, load balancing, and so on. The cloud service model known as platform as a service serves as a web-based environment where developers can build cloud apps, also provides a database operating system and programming language that organizations can use to develop cloud-based software. The third cloud service is software as a service. This broad category encompasses a variety of services such as file storage and backup, web-based email and project management tools. Examples of software as a service cloud service providers include Dropbox. I'm sure everybody's familiar with that. G Suite by Google, Microsoft Office 365, Slack, and Citrix content collaboration. In each of these applications, user can access, share, store, and secure information in the cloud. The last and best is recovery as a service. This is used for backing up and archiving data. Other services include disaster recovery and business continuity solutions. Next slide, please. In closing, what are the future of cloud service? As the availability of cloud service continues to expand, so will their applications in the corporate world. Whether a company chooses to extend existing on-premises software deployment or move 100% to the cloud, these services will continue to simplify how organizations deliver mission-critical data. Thank you. So
all right. Sion, thank you so much for that. And you have now seen innovation from several different perspectives and several different industries. And we're going to wrap things up with Stuart kind of giving us a perspective on innovation regardless of industry or career. And so, Stuart, take it away with diffusion of innovation.
Okay, well, thank you. Actually,
did we lose Stuart? Stuart, can you hear us?
how's that? Okay, is that okay?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. We've had an excellent mix of presenters on this presentation, and what has struck me is the fact that we have Jonathan talking about individuals and innovation. We have Anne talking about organizations, and it's kind of a chicken and egg. Do the individuals adopt the innovation, and then the organization to which they belong collectively adopts it, or does the organization adopt the innovation, such as using, say, Microsoft's Office? Most individuals didn't adopt Microsoft Office, but a company might have. So you can look at it from both standpoints. It's, you know, it's kind of a chicken and egg type of thing. Where does that innovation stop? Now, once you've done the innovation and you've refined it, how do you get the word out? And so the first thing I'm going to ask is, what is an innovation? Okay, and thank you. Now, normally people think of innovation as something that's new and unique, especially if you're an American. You're going to talk about a new pharmaceutical, a new television set, a new computer, cloud, you know, all of these different things that you're seeing in this presentation. But an innovation is really not just that. It's something that is new to that population. And let me give you let's just take a little walk around these pictures here. In the upper left-hand corner, that is a medical medical facility in Kenya that dispenses AIDS, you know, vaccines and medication, everything for AIDS for women. Okay, so here, an innovation here would be, oh yeah, sure, you go to a clinic, you get all these things. Even boiling water in that country at one time was an innovation to cut down on dysentery. So when you think of innovation, don't just think it is always new, shiny, the latest and greatest, and it just superseded something that existed before. What's new to us or new to them might be old hat to us. You go to the right there, that's a film strip projector. At one time, that was an innovation, and kids would kind of vie for the fact that they could push the buttons and make the little 35mm slides or film strips go forward. But now we think about, oh, internet and, you know, all of the different things, but that is in its time and in its place. However, they are still using film strip projectors in developing countries because they don't have all the sophistication we have. If you go down to the lower left, that's a video disc, and 12-inch platter, looks like a DVD, looks like a CD-ROM, but it's analog, and it held, you know, 1.4 gigabytes. I mean, that's not really a whole lot, but that at that time was like, oh my God, that's 108,000 pictures. But at that time, it was, you know, everybody was just very excited about it. If you go to the next one, that was my very first computer, by the way. And it held, let's see, what did it hold? It was 20 megabyte hard drive, megabyte, not gigabyte, not terabyte, 20, and it was $800 for the hard drive. 128 kilobyte RAM, all the way up to the big one, 640 KB. So if you think about those things, you're saying, oh my God, well, that time, that was like the thing. And then, has anybody heard of laser film? I'm just curious if anybody ever heard of that.
No, I haven't.
Okay, it's actually a photographic process that replicates what's in that left-hand corner there, that with a video disc. And actually you reproduced it by contact printing. You know, you just basically, it's a negative, and then you put, and then it becomes a positive, and you can play. And that was the very first machines that realtors were using to show the insides of houses, because they go take pictures, they put them on the laser film, they go to their, and then their office, they could show what a house looked like before they took their customer out there. So that is different than what we normally think of as innovation. How did we get the word out? Let's take just a minute here, a little exercise. How do you tell people about something that's new, that to get them excited about using it? Okay, anybody in the chat? Nope.
Well,
Okay.
we demo it, right?
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Demo. Well, the typical kind of answers that I've gotten when I've talked to people is send emails, memos, tweets, social media, have a hands-on demonstration, just what you were saying. Create a PowerPoint presentation, a video presentation, a webinar like we're doing right here, word of mouth. But you know, unfortunately, sometimes the only thing that they do is just implement it. They say, hey, we're going to use something new, you know, and we're gonna expect you to figure it out. By the way, the military has done that a lot, where they've actually put in something in our learning field without really preparing the instructors on how to integrate it into their curriculum. So that's what's you know, kind of a shame, because that's how some innovation dies, is that nobody actually paves the way for people to understand it. I think one example, for instance, vaccines. You talk to a doctor about vaccines and they talk, you know, in medical terminology people don't understand, and maybe that might be a reason why people don't want to get a vaccination, because they're not hearing it in, you know, plain English. By the way, I just learned the other day that there's some diseases that all your vaccines get wiped out, and you have to start from birth all over again, even if you're an adult. So that's something a lot of people don't know about, that potential. But the innovation is that it's all there, and even if you got it 20 years ago or 30 years ago, you can get it again and be just as protected as you were before. The next slide, please. Okay. To diffuse the, why do we diffuse the innovation? You know, how do we get it out there? Well, we're trying to develop skills, you know, like give and take. Every one of the presenters here, we're talking about teamwork, working together in teams or from an organizational standpoint or an individual standpoint. And then you go out there and you're so excited about your innovation and you just can't wait to share it with everybody. And then you get knocked down because they're saying not invented here, too hard to understand, don't know how to use it, why do we need it? So you've got to start early before something is finished and introduce it to the population. The first people, and there's early adopters and late adopters, probably heard those terms. First people who got iPhones, and other people waited 3 years to make sure there were no bugs in the iPhones, and that now all of a sudden it's safe to start using it. So one of the things you need to do is prepare in advance, not just launch it because you're excited about it. Launch it because you can demonstrate the need or the potential for it, so other people will sign on, and then it'll just grow, where other people will be your spokesperson, and they will be your salespeople, as well as your advocates. So, now let me give you 5 things that match every one of these attributes that I'm talking about. Let's go to the next slide. This you may find interesting because this is actually based on a study that looked at approximately about 1,200 innovations. And they found that regardless of your education, regardless of your country, your language, your background, your practices, your beliefs, your religion, all of these 5 things apply to every human. Okay, now it may not be sophisticated, They may be very primitive, but is that innovation relatively advantageous to the one that it supersedes, or to the one that has just been laid out, for you to consider? When idea or tools, yeah, that's true. Yeah, and a lot of times it's people who kind of help to proliferate the compatibility. So you got relative advantage. Compatibility, is it consistent with the individual's norms, the organizational norm, the population? Like I was saying, people in primitive countries or developing countries or sophisticated countries are going to all have different kind of norms. And so they may or may not trust this innovation. So you have to actually introduce it at the level that they'll understand it. Now, complexity. Now, this first two will help to make the innovation spread. Complexity does not mean it's not complex. It could be nuclear physics, but if you're a nuclear physicist, that's not complex, because that's what you do for a living. You talk to me about it, and it's too complex. So complexity should be at the level of the people that are going to be using it, such as the medical practitioner or the cloud, the person who's in the cloud technology. Trialability, which is a made-up term that these, and I'll tell you the authors of this came up with, and that's to try it on a limited basis. The worst thing you can do with an innovation or something that's brand new is just put it out there to 25,000 people and watch it fail, because nothing's going to go faster in terms of the messaging than this don't work. So trialability, and then the other is observability, which is like try before you buy, and also tell people the results. And I think we're going through that now when we're talking about the COVID vaccination. Once it's successful and people have started taking it, then that innovation, because it is an innovation since it's a new virus. So the name of this, by the way, I should have put it on there and I didn't, and I'm sorry, but it's Everett Rogers, Diffusion of Innovations. Everett M. Rogers, Diffusion of Innovations. It's a book that, regardless of what you're interested in disseminating, these 5 characteristics or attributes match it. So that's something you could use in the future.
All right, Stuart, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay, and there you have it. Different ways of looking at innovation. So with that, what questions does anybody have before we wrap up this webinar? All right, Sion, I'm going to give it back to you to wrap things up. Thank you, all our panelists. We appreciate all your information that you delivered today. And Sion, are you there?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jonathan. Such a wonderful presentation. I'd like to invite everyone to come back next month again. We're going to have another webinar with the topic of One Team Always, maintaining an inclusive team working together to accomplish the mission. We'll have it on Thursday, December 17, 2020 at noon Eastern Time. We'd love to hear from you. Please tell us what you thought of the webinar. Please reach out with your name and email address if you need webinar resources. We're going to have this webinar recording and other recordings available. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you, all the presenters.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we wrap up today's webinar. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful week.
Yes. Take care, everyone.